Polar bear versus saltwater crocodile. Who would win in a fight between these apex carnivores? Well, watch to the end to find out, since this is gonna be a very interesting video. First up, we have the male polar bear. This beast mainly lives in the Arctic Circle and is the apex predator of its environment. They mainly hunt seals and walruses, but also scavenge carcasses away from other animals. Polar bears are considered the largest living bear species, slightly edging out the Kodiak bear in average size. A typical mature male can weigh between 800 to 1400 pounds, 8 to 10 feet long, 7 to 10 feet tall on its hind legs, and 4 to 5 feet tall on all fours. Weaponry. It's no doubt that a polar bear is one of the strongest land carnivores. They have remarkably powerful forelimbs with huge paws that help them tread across their cold environment and maul prey. Their paws are enormous, reaching up to 12 inches in diameter. Having such large paws helps the bear distribute its weight over its snowy environment, allowing it to grip the ground easier. At the end of its forelimbs are sharp, curved claws that grow around 3.5 inches in length. On average, a polar bear's claws are sharper and more curved, but shorter in length compared to other bear species. This is likely due to its hypercarnivorous diet and to gain traction on icy surfaces. Their claws are really good for tearing into the skin of other animals like walruses and seals. Along with its mauling method of killing, polar bears have a really powerful bite force. Their strong jaws are capable of producing up to 2000 psi depending on the size of the bear. Just for reference, that's around 12 times greater than a human's bite. Inside a polar bear's jaws are teeth specifically designed for ripping apart meat. Its 4 canine teeth help the bear puncture through the fat of its victims. However, its bite would probably not be very effective when trying to cut through the tough hide of the crocodile. Defense and physique. Due to the polar bear living in the frigid temperatures of the Arctic, they need a great insulation system to survive. Polar bears develop a large layer of fat that can grow up to 4 inches thick. They also have a dense layer of fur, which assists them in keeping dry, blending into their environment, and heat regulation. Overall, their physique makes a great tanky build that can absorb a lot of shock upon impact. Speed and agility. On land, polar bears are said to run up to 25 miles per hour in short bursts and have an average walking speed of around 3 miles per hour. They are pretty agile for a creature of its size and are really great grapplers due to their anatomy. However, they tend to have bad stamina compared to other bears due to their great insulation system, causing them to overheat rather quickly. Polar bears are really good swimmers and often chase prey in the water. They can obtain a swimming speed of around 6 miles per hour and can hold their breath for up to 2 minutes. Fighting knowledge. Polar bears are the apex predators of their environment. They actively hunt walruses, seals, and fish, but also scavenge carcasses away from other animals. They fight with other members of their own species, walruses, and the occasional wolf pack. However, they do not encounter any creatures resembling a crocodile whatsoever, but, overall, it would have a decent amount of fighting knowledge and experience. Alright, let's move on to the saltwater crocodile. This beast inhabits the rivers and coastlines of Southeast Asia, Northern Australia, and parts of Eastern India. They are hypercarnivores and eat just about anything they can get their jaws around, like fish, crabs, and buffalo. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile. A typical mature male can grow between 900 to 1200 pounds and 15 to 18 feet long, so the polar bear and salty would be around the same weight, but the saltwater croc would have a length advantage, while the polar bear would have a height advantage. Weaponry. Crocodilians are famously known for their deadly jaws and immense bite strength. The saltwater crocodile, being the largest living crocodilian, makes it a powerful foe. These monsters have one of the strongest bite forces out of any living creature, which comes to around 3700 psi, which is just shy of 2 tons. Just for reference, that's around 23 times greater than a human's bite and is significantly stronger than what a polar bear can produce. On top of having a more powerful bite, the salty's skull is much larger and more elongated than the polar bear's. Inside its jaws are 66 long, conical teeth that help the crocodilian snatch and latch onto its prey. The salty is capable of doing a move called the death roll, which further injures any limb it grabs onto by twisting it violently. The death roll can be achieved on land, but it's much easier to do in water. Along with its formidable bite, crocodiles have been known to use their tails as weapons in brawls, but a simple tail whack would likely not deal any damage to the polar bear whatsoever. But it could be used to distract and annoy the bear in a confrontation. Defense and physique. The crocodilian lineage survived on Earth for over 200 million years, so it's safe to say that they have developed a good defense. Modern day crocodiles have bone plating called osteoderms running along their back, along with thick scales. This provides great protection against sharp objects and bites from other creatures. However, crocodilians have a vulnerable underbelly, which the bear could exploit if it manages to flip the salty on its back. But it would be considerably hard to do given its much lower center of gravity and weight distribution. The overall difference between the crocodilians and bear's defense is a type of protective material. Crocodiles have a hard, rough outer layer that protects against sharp objects, while the polar bear has a fatty, shock-absorbing defense along with its dense fur. At equal weight, they both could probably take around the same amount of damage, but I think the polar bear would slightly edge out the salty in this aspect due to its body structure and shock-absorbing defense. Speed and agility. On land, I think it's pretty obvious that the polar bear has an advantage in this regard. The saltwater croc has short, stubby legs and a relatively flat body. This makes it a pretty slow and lumbering creature on land. However, when it gets into the water, it's a lot faster. Saltwater crocs are said to swim up to 20 miles per hour in short bursts, which is significantly faster than the 6 miles per hour a polar bear can achieve. On top of that, the salty's body is more streamlined and adapted for an aquatic way of life. This would make it a lot more maneuverable in water. However, since crocodiles are cold-blooded, they tend to have poor stamina. Bears in general are known to have great endurance in fights. Even though the polar bear might not have the best stamina among the bear community, it still would be far better than the crocodiles. Fighting knowledge. Saltwater crocodiles fight with other members of their own species, and actively hunt prey like fish, crabs, and buffalo. When hunting a creature on land, they like to sneak attack it and drag it underwater, trying to avoid any physical fight unless absolutely necessary. However, when hunting or fighting an animal in the water, they become a lot more aggressive and can cause a lot more damage. Salties do not encounter any creatures resembling a polar bear whatsoever, but overall, I would say it has a decent amount of fighting knowledge and experience, with it being on par with the polar bear. Alright, we have our stats. So, who would win in a fight between a polar bear and a saltwater crocodile? They both live in completely different environments, so let's imagine this fight takes place in an equal climate for the both of them, which would be around 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Since there are multiple factors we have to consider like terrain, I will give two different verdicts. If this fight takes place on land by a shallow body of water, I would say the polar bear would win 60% of the time. Its superior speed, agility, and endurance on land would provide a large advantage since it could likely wear down the croc. The bear also has more weaponry at its disposal, like its huge paws and powerful bite force. The initial mauling of the polar bear might not immediately cause severe damage due to the croc's armor, but the strikes add up, and in the long run, the croc would tire out, leaving it vulnerable. Also, if the salty gets a lucky bite in, the bear's shock-absorbing defense could likely tank the initial hit without any severe wounds. And, like I mentioned earlier, doing the death roll on land is much harder to achieve than in the water, especially with large, struggling animals with deadly weapons. However, if this fight takes place in a large body of water like a lake or river, I would say the saltwater crocodile would win 90% of the time. Its physique is much more adapted for an aquatic way of life, and its superior speed and maneuverability would be a massive advantage. The exposed limbs of the bear would also be much easier to grab onto and do the infamous death roll. Also, the salty can hold its breath much longer than the polar bear underwater, which further gives it more opportunities to strike the bear when coming up for air.